Hi, welcome to Art Insider. I'm Aprajita Jain and today we focus on the art institutions of our country. Of course, museums stand on the top of the food chain and are often funded and founded by governments, either on a state level or on the national level. A nation needs a museum not only to act as a preserver of its culture, but also to educate its public about its history. It acts as a repository of its creative minds. Our first guest on the show today is Professor Rajiv Lochan, who has been the director of the National Gallery of Modern Art for the last 16 years. Dr. Lochan, thank you so much for being a part of our show and accepting to talk to us. Can you tell us a little bit about your journey over 16 years?
Well, that's a very tall question to answer in the little time that we have. Well, I'll begin by saying I was a practicing artist. I'm still one, except that it has taken back seat. I was an academician. So I was the other side of the fence. And taking up the responsibility of being at the National Gallery of Modern Art allowed me to deal with issues that I was theoretically involved with, deal with works of art, in their physicality, and organize exhibitions not only with a historical perspective, but to ensure that the language and the transformation of the language in the context of this country, the way it has evolved pertinent to this land and pertinent to the ethos of this country, the way it has transformed itself to amalgamate and be contemporary. So that's the long journey that I had to address in a scenario where tradition on one side and contemporaneity and modernity on the other were major issues to be able to be shared with the common masses, because not to forget that we're called a National Gallery of Modern Art, but we are a museum.
Once you told me that to come to contemporary, I have to show the past. And like we're discussing, we're building on the past. Can you tell us a little bit about your 3 favorite exhibitions that you've done here?
3 is a very difficult question to answer. The earlier part is easier.
Right.
You see, I indirectly mentioned this in my earlier statements, that in a country that had not celebrated its own artists,
Yes.
who had spent a lifetime in establishing what we understand as truly modern Indian art, after Picasso, I had to formulate a system and a balance between showcasing them and honoring them with retrospectives. And that's what we did. K.G. Subramanian, Satish Gujral, Nandlal Bose.
But museums can be started by private individuals too. To understand a little bit more about this model, we speak to Mrs. Kyra Naidoo, who started her museum, KNMA, in 2010. The focus of her museum is 20th century art of South Asia till its present times. We speak to her about her vision and all the challenges that it brings with it. We have on our show today somebody very, very special, somebody that I regard as almost a path breaker, Mrs. Kyra Naidoo. Thank you very much for being a part of this show.
Thank you.
You were awarded by Forbes as being, you got a philanthropy award for it. Can you tell us a little bit about the journey from the inception of the idea to the physical space at Noida and then Saket, of course?
Well, the idea was germination in the mind. I had really no idea what a museum would entail or how I would go about it. Then I started talking to people and trying to figure out, but nowhere did I imagine the amount of work that needed to be put in. I think I might have been daunted if I had realized how much input was required. But once I decided that the museum was going to become a reality, I started collecting in more earnestness. I started looking for art which would fill my gaps in my collection. And my collection at that stage was quite honestly not very large. Today it seems that it was very large, but when I look back today, I mean as of now, to those days, it was a very nascent collection, which built over the next 5 years when the museum became a reality. So that journey was one of discovery and putting my roots down, so to speak, in this world of art, and then building on the collection as it was at that time.
So I want to come back to the idea of legacy building, and this is not only personal legacy, this is legacy for the country. So what are your thoughts about your role in safeguarding and promoting the country's legacy?
Well, I don't know if I thought of it quite like that when I started. I certainly thought that I would like to leave the museum for posterity, that it would supersede my lifetime and would be something to be there in the future for generations to come. Because I think India has a huge legacy of art and culture which extends hundreds of years earlier, and it's time that somebody took that forward. So that was a thought, but I don't know if it was as formulated as I'm saying today. Today I feel that the museum will be there for generations, and we will leave a legacy behind of Indian art which can be admired, and the museum will play a role to play in that.
So over the last few years, with the country, with galleries struggling, you've single-handedly kept a lot of them afloat. What are your thoughts about that?
Well, somebody has to play a role. Unfortunately, no other museums really came up. I thought we would be path breakers and that a lot of other people would follow our path and more museums would come up. That hasn't happened, but now there are some movements, and so maybe some other people will get into building museums and this legacy will grow, which I think is very important, because the state is not capable of doing everything, and in India there is just a couple of state-owned museums which are there, but the state isn't able to fulfill all its responsibilities. So I think the private sector has to pitch in and put in their inputs as well.
And so what's the future for the museum? What's keeping you completely excited in the next few years?
Is building the museum. We need to get on with building a dedicated museum space, and I hope that we will finalize the land very soon and then start the construction. I think in some way I am fulfilling an ambition by giving back to society by building a museum which is going to be definitely larger than what it is today, and I hope I'm able to fulfill that, and I think I'm a happy person.
Thank you so very much. It's time for a short break, but when we're back, we'll be looking at new models for art institutions that have sprouted over the last 10 years.